Certainly, here is a long and detailed story in English that incorporates the words you provided with explanations embedded within the narrative. In the vast, barren lands of the kingdom of Asfair, the ground was covered in dry, cracked soil and lifeless weeds that sprawled as far as the eye could see. The heavens seemed forever dreary, casting an endless gray hue over the land, as if the sky itself wore a perpetual scowl. The kingdom's once fertile fields had withered and died, turning the once vibrant glades and meadows into desolate glades. On the outskirts of this bleak landscape, there stood an ancient castle, nestled atop the fells. Its foreboding presence cast long shadows over the tangled forests and valleys below. Legend had it that the castle held treasures of unrivaled wealth, treasures that could turn the tide of fortune for anyone who dared to seek them. The castle's current occupant, Lord Baldwin, was an old man with a gritty resolve. He was known throughout the kingdom for his unrivaled strength and fierce, gruefly demeanor. Yet, years of fighting had wearied him, and he often found himself slumped in his chair by the porch, staring out at the withered lands he had once hoped to revive. Beneath the castle, in the ancient stone-lined dungeons, the air was heavy with dampness. The walls, covered in moss and creeping vines, seemed to croak and creak in the silence, almost as if the castle itself were alive, growling in its sleep. The corridors were narrow and laden with an air of despair, a shrill cry echoing occasionally through the dark halls. One stormy evening, as a whoosh of the wind rattled the castle walls, a faint sound interrupted the stillness. It was a soft yet distinct chirping, providing a stark contrast to the bleak and foreboding atmosphere. Young Aliana, the Lord's niece, had just arrived from the far corners of the realm. Her father had sent her to learn the ways of her ancestors and perhaps uncover the secrets that might bring life back to their land. Aliana was always curious, often meddlesome in her explorations of the castle. Her light-footed steps, almost like the scuttling of a mouse, took her to places long since forgotten. One day, she stumbled upon an old, worn brindle that had once been placed upon some great horse long dead. The leather was cracked and crinkled, bearing marks of age and use. "I sense something amiss," she murmured to herself, feeling an inexplicable pull towards a certain wall. Pressing around, she discovered a hidden latch that, when triggered, opened up into a secret passage. A gust of tangy, stale air greeted her as she ventured inside. The tunnel was dark, only illuminated by the faint, flickering torches that lined the ancient walls. As she made her way deeper, she encountered a series of crocks, pots filled with aged stew that must have been left by the castle's inhabitants centuries ago. Her footsteps echoed in the silence, the occasional spluttered guttural noise of the old castle resonating in response. Deeper within, she found herself in a chamber filled with chests and crates. Upon opening one, she found parchments and maps. Intrigued, she sat down to study them. Her eyes widened as she read tales of a great bounty, a ransom collected over the years. There were accounts of hoards of gold, rare jewels, and artifacts of historical significance. Yet there was a warning about a great serpent, its eyes like fiery coals, and its slithering body covered in scales like iron, with fangs sharp enough to skewer any who dared disturb its hoard. Unbeknownst to Aliana, her presence in the dungeons had not gone unnoticed. In the shadows, two figures circled. One was pinch-faced Gideon, a conniving servant with a penchant for meddling, and his accomplice, the broad-shouldered yet dim-witted Hinder, always blundering about. For years, they had plotted to uncover the castle's secrets and claim its treasures for themselves, but had always been stumped by the myriad traps and puzzles. When they saw Aliana disappear into the secret passage, they followed, carefully observing her every move. Little did they know that their blunders would soon place them in grave danger. Deep in the cave, the atmosphere changed. The air felt heavier, thicker, as though charged with an ancient power. The further they ventured, the more the oppressive dread intensified. With each step, the cries and skriking sounds echoed louder. And then they heard it, a deep, resonant thumping accompanied by a low, sinister growling. It was the serpent, awakened from centuries of slumber. Its imposing form slithered out from the dark recesses, its scales shimmering in the dim light of the torches. Gideon, in his typical manner, tried to grasp control of the situation. "Do not bother," he hissed at Hinder. "Leave this to me." But before Gideon could enact his plan, the serpent lunged. The ensuing chaos shattered the stillness. Hinder, in his blundering attempt to escape, bumped into a torch, causing it to fall and start a small fire. Aliana, filled with both fear and resolve, took advantage of the confusion. She grabbed a nearby sword and, with a swift, desperate motion, managed to strike the serpent. The wound was not fatal, but enough to cause the creature to recoil and retreat back into the depths. Breathing heavily, Aliana turned to see Gideon and Hinder cowering, their faces pale. "You're fools," she muttered, taking command. "This place is not for the likes of you." With the serpent temporarily subdued, they all made a hasty retreat. Emerging from the dungeon's oppressive gloom, Aliana, Gideon, and Hinder found themselves back in the castle grounds. The tarnished chandeliers of the old hall glimmered faintly as though acknowledging their return. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the castle's windows. Aliana stood on the porch, a renewed sense of purpose filling her heart. She knew that she had narrowly escaped death, but the knowledge she uncovered was invaluable. In the end, the journey was not merely about claiming a treasure, but understanding the legacy of her ancestors, the kingdom's history, and the true meaning of courage and sacrifice. Gideon and Hinder, realizing that their scheming ways led them nowhere, decided to mend their ways, at least to an extent. They had no choice but to assist Aliana as she began her quest to restore the kingdom of Asfair. The land, though still bleak, now had a glimmer of hope, a hope that burned brightly in the heart of a young girl who dared to face the shadows. Even as the challenges ahead felt daunting, Aliana's resolve remained unrivaled. She was determined to lift the foreboding curse and breathe life into the barren lands, to replace the bitter thumping of fear with the harmonious chirping of a renewed world. And so, with every step, Aliana moved closer to her destiny, never forgetting the depths she had ventured and the lessons she had learned in the castle's shadowy embrace. I hope this story helps you practice and remember the words you've learned.